Thanks all so much. We're going to be having a more streamlined version of the Reverie, which we have Mondays at 8 p.m. Eastern. We have an amazing group of individuals here. I'm really excited to get started with them. First of all, though, if you're watching us on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe. You can consider becoming a YouTube member, hitting that join button, and supporting this channel. If you enjoy getting this content 7 days a week, like we do. So yeah, support us and all the things that we're trying to do here. All right, so we are going to start introducing these people. I will start with our friend Jay Chow, who we haven't seen forever, for like for a lot of months. But I like thought of our friend Jay Chow.
Guys, how fucking toasted are you right now?
Toasted by you think I do drugs? I don't do drugs.
You sure
kidding?
about that, man?
You
seem high as fuck right now.
My eyes are
His eyes are fine.
Are just like this. This is my face.
He's just high on life.
Yeah.
All right, brother.
Bro.
I do no drugs. Period. Like I don't even drink. I've never smoked marijuana. I've never.
All right. Well, you need to get some. You need to get some sleep. There's such straight edge.
Wait, never.
You need to come to a barn party in Nebraska.
Wait, you say you don't even drink, Prime?
Last time I had alcohol. Well, I may have had alcohol on the lips of a woman, I guess. But like, last time I actually drank alcohol, I was like 14.
Alrighty. Well, hey, you do your straight edge, you man.
No, but you're a leftist. Like you, what are you doing?
What?
You're not even living life.
I don't do anything.
That has everything
Like the
to
Cat
do.
Williams bit. If you ain't got no job and you ain't smoking weed, what the fuck are you doing with your life? Like, yeah, it's a classic joke.
I think the thing is that we
Jesus,
assume most leftists are like either drug addicts or alcoholics because that's the only way they could believe the crazy shit they say.
100%. They gotta be
If you're not
degenerate in some
doing that,
sort of
like,
way.
what's the excuse? Like, what's going on?
Right?
Right?
Like capitalism, hating jobs, hating money. Of course, they have to be lazy and stupid and be on drugs.
It was a
They
quote
can't
by
be
the late
rational or
great
anything
Rush
else.
Limbaugh, but marijuana just makes chemically induced Democrats.
Yeah, but okay. So oh, this has been wonderful. Let's continue on with the introduction. Jay Chow, right?
What's up?
Thanks for being here, buddy.
Happy to be here. But I might want to forget being on this panel because the chief reason why leftists and liberals take drugs is because we hear the shit that from conservatives and we just want to forget about it. So we drink and do as many drugs as we can in order to get back into the bliss of ignorance of reality where there is no such thing as conservatives. Well, I don't hate conservatives. I have many conservative friends. I am Jay Chow. I make YouTube videos on political science, and it was in those classes that I met a lot of conservatives and had a good time with them. A lot of good discussions, a lot of good debates and whatnot. And in a little way, I'm trying to replicate that on my own on YouTube and also Twitch stream on JChow Live. That's twitch.tv/JChow Live. That's where I am right now. And happy to be here, as always.
Out to Jay Chow.
Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Now let's go to my friend KOT Nation. I've been hitting this man up many times, but like he just we haven't been able to get him because he's busy. He's just like a farmer. He's like, you know, creating life, you know, right? Right. So why is he's pro-choice, right? So anyway, thank you, thank you, KOE, for coming through, buddy.
Thank you for having me, Prime. Thank you very much. And folks, you need to be able to subscribe. You need to be subscribed right here. PrimeCayes on YouTube, PrimeCayes on Twitch, folks. But I have a question for all of you. Are you ready? Folks, they mean, are you ready? Well, let's get ready to reverie, folks. I am the devilishly handsome outlaw himself, your king of extreme, the man of the hour, the man with the power, the man that makes the other podcast cower, the prince and potentate of the political parlance, the lord of the Scottish Highlands, and one damn handsome man if I do say so myself, Phil K-O-E. You can find me at KOE Nation on YouTube, KOE Nation on Twitch, KOE Nation on TikTok. That's K as in king, O as in oh my god. You can find KOE Nation on YouTube, TikTok, and Twitch. E as in extremely happy to know. You can find KOE Nation on YouTube, TikTok, and Twitch, folks. It's all very on brand. I hope you come join the party, and you come. We have a complete open borders policy at the KOE Nation. So long as you are cool and chill about shit, you are in, folks. God bless every last one of you, and I am looking forward to getting into quite some interesting topics of the day right here at the PrimeCayes panel. But folks, these lips of mine, they can speak no evil. And with that, I yield back to you beautiful people.
He's so perfect. I love him so much. And I did the rest of my panel a disservice because now they have to follow him. So thank you for the kind words and for being here, friend. Next, let's go to Scott. Scott, who is a frequent flyer here, and we're very glad for it. Scott, thanks for stopping by once again.
Hey, how's everybody doing? So I'm Scott. You know me. You probably hate me. That's okay, because I'm right and you're wrong. I'm an anarcho-capitalist. We do a duo stream along with my co-hosts. We do these debates from time to time. We do a lot of interviews. We recently interviewed Dr. Walter Block on evictionism, and that's now up on YouTube. So Fabian Liberty on Twitch, Fabian Liberty on YouTube, Liberty_Fabian on Twitter. But if you just search Fabian Liberty, you'll find us anywhere you look. We're also on Rumble, but nobody cares about Rumble. That being said, yeah, I'm excited to be here. Love it. I'm really excited to talk about the first topic. This is something I never in a million years thought would have showed up anywhere, and I fucking love these guys.
Okay, all right.
So excited to talk about this shit.
Okay, glad I found something that you might enjoy. Really. Okay, let's go to Fanatic. Our friend Fanatic, right? A VIP in this community, right? Fanatic, who does a lot. And if in case you don't know Fanatic, you'll understand him soon, right? Like why he's so loved and controversial in this community. Thank you, Fanatic, for being around.
Yeah, emphasis on that controversial. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I can't wait. These are going to be decent topics. I expect to be yelling at niggas, specifically Fabian, because I know he's going to interrupt me a bunch of times and not let me finish sentences. You can find me at twitch.tv/MrFanatic.
Okay, awesome. And then, of course, our Dark Lord and Savior, Doobie, is back with us, right? Consistently, like the first person I send an invite to is my man Doobie, right? Doobie, my great partner in all this. So I'm always happy that he spends time with us. Doobie, how are you today?
I'm doing very well.
Anything else?
I'm Doobie.
Okay. All right. Okay. So we will continue on then. Excited to have you all here. All right. So this is I hope this is a really interesting topic, and I hope it's something different than something you guys usually discussed. So the Pharaoh Islands has a traditional hunt in which fishermen get together to capture and kill dolphins. And the Faroe Islands are like between like Scotland and another island. It's near Scotland.
Officially part of Denmark.
Thank you. In which fishermen get together to capture and kill dolphins. The dolphins aren't killed for commercial enterprise, rather simply to help feed and supply the island residents. However, last year, the dolphin hunt broke a record by killing 1,400 plus dolphins in a single event, where they usually kill like 1,000 marine animals like total throughout like a year, right? The slaughter literally made the sea blood red. This ignited a conflict over whether the tradition should continue. Under pressure from foreign environmentalists, the government is proposing a cap of 500 dolphins per year to be killed in these slaughters. Do you think such a cap is warranted? Should governments buckle to pressure from environmentalists just because they perceive an action as animal cruelty? Should traditions be subject to scrutiny by activists who don't even live in the territory? Okay, yeah, I'll put a link in chat guys, in case you don't know, and like content warning, like trigger warning, if you aren't a big fan of gore or anything like that, like animals being hurt. But there's a video in that link and it shows what happened last year. It's real. Like I said, the sea is literally blood red with how many dolphins they killed. So yeah, I'm really curious about this. And like what Fern gonna say. Start with J Chow.
So I think if there weren't any environmental impacts to a bunch of dolphins just being killed all at once, and we also have to consider that this isn't just an event that happens once, but probably in many places and many times over the year and over well, it's a tradition, so it's been happening for maybe even centuries. And that it's not just dolphins, but it's other animals as well. If it didn't just like affect the environment or didn't affect the just entire ecosystems, maybe the food chain and whatnot, then I wouldn't have a problem with it. And I have no idea if this event actually does have an effect on it, but if it does, then that calls into question, well, what kind of an intervention we want to do in order to protect the environment and in order to have it so that other organisms, including ourselves, aren't negatively affected. We rely on other species within our ecosystem for food as well as for other things, whether it be beneficially, maybe it's like the algae, for example. Right. So I think like when it comes to the activists coming up and being concerned about it, the government coming up and being concerned about it, and you kind of have that like this network put this pressure in order to get something done, then that's something I'm generally in support of. And I don't believe that for the sake of tradition that we ought to keep it, because if a tradition is bad and maybe back then we just didn't know better, but now we do, then it's time to act. It's time to change.
AOE Nation.
Well, thank you, sir. To me, I think this is one of those instances where I've always believed native and indigenous hunting rights absolutely need to be respected. I think that this is a 1,000-year tradition on this particular island amongst these folks, and I think they're not really making a major environmental impact in any way. It just seems bad because it's dolphins and pirate whales. Now, there's something you all need to keep in mind here, folks. There was an old poet, I can't remember his name, but he wrote this: "When a man crushes a cockroach, they're considered a villain. When a man crushes a cockroach, he's considered a hero, rather. There we go. When he crushes a butterfly, they're considered a villain." Our morality does have an aesthetic component to it. And so that's something you need to keep in mind, is these are people that are living in an island of a population of about 50,000, which is about the population of Grand Island, Nebraska, which is not a very big city. Okay, it's about 50,000 people. That's the entire population of this entire nation. And these are folks who are eating seagulls, they're eating sheep, they're eating whatever the fuck they can find, and they have every right to sustain themselves and subsist themselves on their own natural resources as they see fit. It's there, and this is the big part that a lot of folks who are environmental activists have a really hard time grasping and wrapping their minds around. It is their home. It is not your place to say what they do in their home. And let's be frank, this particular activity does not affect anybody within the sound of my voice, not even in the most abstract way. If you try to, like Kevin Bacon, 7 degrees of separation, try to find a way, it does not affect you. And so for you to come in and say, no, you do not eat the pretty dolphins because that upsets my metropolitan sensibilities, it does kind of have a let them eat cake flavor a little bit. So these are folks who are subsisting on what the ocean gives them, and this is their way of life. And for you to just say you shouldn't do that, to be frank, who are you to say? Who the fuck are you to say whether or not they should live this way? And with that, I yield to somebody that is apparently very much looking forward to this, if you're going to be the next guy. Prime, thanks for having me on. This one's going to be interesting.
Scott, please.
Yeah, so I would say pretty much everything Phil said, but I would like to add some things. The real reason that they're willing to accept 500 as a cap on what is the longest recorded hunting statistics statistical record in the entire world, because they have been very, very, very careful in making sure that they do conservation. They bring them in, they track them scientifically. They place trackers on them so they can look at the patterns. They make sure that they're not doing anything above 0.01% of the population. So that they can maintain those levels. The real reason that they're doing that is because of methylmercury poisoning. And the fact of the matter is despite the fact that this archipelago is based primarily off of what the sea can provide, which is seagulls and fish and pilot whales, which we're calling dolphins because they're technically dolphins, but they're kind of like dumb dolphins that have a lot more blubber and meat on them. A lot of what they call steak. The grind, right, is the act, it's the hunt, it's the meat itself, and it is the pilot whale. They're willing to accept that because they now have to limit how much food they can actually eat from that so that they don't poison their bodies and they don't poison their children. And they don't have the ability to farm in this nation. The only thing they have is the ability to kill sheep and to use, goat's milk and things like that. And then they have to have like some form of modern, way of gaining money. And then, like importing stuff after that. That is the real reason that they're willing to accept these numbers. In 2017, they had killed less than 300. Right. And so this number does fluctuate. It is an exceedingly high number, but it is something that has also been challenged by the Sea Shepherds, which are environmental activist groups that come into their land and try and stop the dolphins from coming there. Sometimes they get arrested. And so what I would say is not only should they keep this tradition, not only is it their private property that they have homesteaded, specifically the fjords that are very clearly for over 1,000 years, they have maintained those fjords and they have maintained that tradition of bringing in and moving the dolphins or the pilot whales because it is their homesteaded common property of their island nation. I think they should be able to violently remove any protesters that show up there. I think if Sea Shepherds show up in boats and hop in the fjords, they should be able to fire rounds at them and kill them if they need to in order to protect their homeland and protect their food and to protect their culture as they see fit.
Violently remove. Okay.
Well, that part and everything else.
Thank you.
That last part I'm not quite sure about, but most of it, yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Scott. Please, Fanatic.
Oh wow, this is gross. I hate agreeing with this guy, but yeah, he's right. I think when you start trying to impose your will on other people, it sounds absolutely ridiculous. And I think like there always has to be a context that's given about like whether like how something is impacting people. For instance, I remember there was that case where there was all these environmental people that were like, crying about Cecil the lion being killed by some dentist woman or something. She was just hunting it, I guess, for game. And so people were like, yeah, she killed this lion named Cecil. And one of the people that was like actually from the area that Cecil had been terrorizing for God knows how long, was just like, I don't understand what you guys are. I remember when he killed my friend. I remember when we weren't allowed to walk to school anymore because Cecil was out there and he could kill us. I remember all of the impact that had on us and like how terrifying it was. So when you start talking about like, oh, protect Cecil the lion, like to me it just sounds like hogwash because like that lion had eaten people. And just like anything else, once they get a taste for blood, then they start becoming more like that becomes something that they seek more. And yeah, that was something that was happening. You can't impose your will and your way of life and your context on other people and say you're not living right. I think they have a right to their autonomy. And if like this is how they survive, this is like part of their food source and stuff, as long as they're not hurting the environment, such as like, oh, they're killing enough of them that they're gonna like make them go extinct and they're gonna damage the rest of the world. Like if they're not doing something like that, I don't understand like how we would even entertain the conversation that they should be considering whatever the freak we're talking.
Interesting. I think you might have a fun conversation with this. Doobie, go.
So if there's no like far-reaching detrimental environmental impact on the rest of the world, I really don't care how many dolphins or whales they kill, whether it's for food or for pleasure. I don't give a fuck. They can, hang dolphins from their street posts if they want to. But that being said, I think to the wider question is like whether or not traditions should be subject to the scrutiny of activists. I think the answer is like absolutely. But I wouldn't limit it to activists. I think that nations typically have an interest in spreading their version of civilization over the planet. If we have the ability to impose our version of morality, culture, etc., on another nation, and have it benefit us in the short or long term, or have them look more like something that we'd consider moral or good, then yeah, we should absolutely do this. Whether it's like through direct force if necessary, or just like pressure, right? Economic pressure, social pressure, whatever it is.
So I'm excited that DB is here. I was thinking of DB when I was writing this question because I knew he would take that stance. We've talked about something similar previously, and I think I'm always of two minds about this, and imposing our will because I take a bit of what Fnatic said, right? Then I take a bit of what DB said. Like Fnatic talking about how people like maybe don't understand the culture, right? Like us Westerners saying, "Oh, this is a bad thing," right? And it shouldn't have happened. Where if you look within the context of whatever culture we're talking about, no, this actually makes a lot of sense. And like viewing it through our morality is kind of inconsequential and more detrimental rather than like stepping outside of ourselves. But then again, some shit is just terrible. It's just awful that people get up to. So figuring out that line, I think, is super interesting. I'd really like to discuss it, which is kind of where I want to focus on. So yeah, open to the panel.
Yeah,
So
listen,
I want to
really
mention
quickly,
something.
There are some traditions that are really, really terrible, right? And this is going to be a really controversial thing to say. You guys can suck me, I don't care. That thing that they were talking about that I discovered from some crazy conservatives, and I thought that they were just lying, and then it turns out that they were actually accurate about those Jewish people that are going around sucking those baby dicks as part of like their circumcision process.
Yes.
That was freaking nuts.
Well,
They bite it off with their teeth. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know.
didn't think we were going to get here tonight.
Yep, it's going here.
Straight there.
In that situation, like they said that
Within minutes.
Yeah, people were talking about the fact that like, yo, what you should be doing. Like, one, there was these cases of these babies that were getting STDs because the Jewish people that were sucking their dicks actually had
It was one priest, one rabbi.
No, but it was no. There was a bunch. There were so many cases, in fact, that eventually the state legislature created legislation that said basically we're going to track this to find out who's sucking the baby dicks, so then we can find out like if you're giving these kids whatever. And then they eventually took it back when the Jewish people said, okay, if anyone sucks a baby dick and then gives the baby herpes or something, then we'll like prevent that person from doing it. But then there's no oversight or anything to make sure that they're doing it. And so then there's still these babies getting their dick sucked and then getting freaking meningitis and all sorts of other STDs and nonsense that doesn't make any sense. So that's a tradition. And the reason why they're doing that is purely just rooted in tradition. There are times where you can recognize that a tradition is harmful. Like this used to be something that maybe we were doing at some point out of superstition or out of ignorance. But if we see something as harmful, any tradition needs to get the hell out. Tradition is the corpse of wisdom. It just doesn't make any sense to maintain something purely for tradition.
Let's go to
following that line.
Let's go to Scott, Doobie, J Chow.
So I wanted to say two things real quick. The first thing is when talking about like that line and does that line apply here to the Faroese? That line clearly does not apply to the Faroese, even if we're taking like the consequentialist or like the Fifis argument here, right? No matter what it is, because they have a book. It's, I couldn't get a copy. I was trying to find a copy for you, PrimeCayes. They have a book called 2 Minutes. And the reason the book is called 2 Minutes is because they train their teenagers when they specifically wade out into the water and they make sure that they go for the aorta as quick as possible. It is literally the most humane way that you can kill pilot whales. And they make this argument often, which I think is an interesting argument when they speak to journalists and stuff, because they don't do this in secret, like in Japan, where they like try and hide the cameras and shit. Like they're very open about this, and they'll say like, yeah, you people literally grow pigs and animals in cages their entire fucking lives. And what we do is we let them live a happy and long life. And then when it comes time that we need food for our people, we bring them in and we kill them as quickly and as humanely as is possible. And then we drag them in. The reason the water turns red with blood is because they intentionally do this in a more humane way, which is to kill them as quickly as possible and then hook them and bring them to shore. Right. So, I mean, like there isn't a more humane way to kill pilot whales. The other thing I wanted to say in regards to what Fnatic is saying is Yeah, I completely agree with you. And that's why I'm a proponent of natural law and non-aggression, is because if you have a philosophical basis in what is considered aggression and what is considered wrong to do to other people, we can actually look and use logic to ascertain what is a tradition that is harmful and what is a tradition that we may not like, but we can say fuck off to, because is it an act of aggression against a person that has attained personhood? Dolphins have not attained personhood. Human beings have. And so when you are harming other human beings with your tradition and against their consent, which children cannot consent, buck that tradition. I don't care about your goddamn culture. You're committing violence against other human beings. And that's, I think, one of the big reasons that a lot of people follow natural law philosophy.
Let's go to Deep.
Sure.
J Chow.
Well, I just want to be like really clear about what we're talking about with the Jewish thing. It's not that they're like biting the foreskin off with their teeth. I mean, unless something changed recently. My understanding is that they actually use like a knife to cut off the foreskin, and then they suck out they do put their lips on the penis and suck out the blood, right? And they suck on the penis to get the blood. So yeah, they're not actually like chewing off baby foreskins, but still, yeah, they're sucking on baby dick.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think it's interesting because Prime and I had a conversation a while back about something pretty similar in lots of ways, where we were wondering if you're like the outside observer, right? You're the outside culture, the more advanced civilization, though this stuff does happen in the United States, unfortunately, the baby dick sucking. If there's no like, Prime, I'm just gonna lay out what we were talking about specifically.
Okay.
There was a tribe that did this. I don't know if they still do this. I think they've like massively diminished how much this is happening over the years. But it used to be a tradition in this tribe, the Sambian tribe in New Guinea, to when a child hit, I think, the age of 7 years old, off the top of my head, they began going through like a male rite of passage. One of those rites of passage was and this was because they believed that males weren't born with semen. They needed to get semen from other men. One of the rites of passages for years, these little boys would go around giving the older boys and the men in the tribe blowjobs every day and swallowing their semen. And this would go on for years. And this was meant to like get the woman out of them, basically, and to replace it with masculinity, and to give them a supply of semen that they could use in their life. Now, when people showed up and they realized this was happening, right? They didn't like force them to stop militarily, right? They kind of like tried to outlaw it. They tried to convince them not to do it. They tried to convert them, and eventually they kind of like stopped doing it on their own. I think, Prime, if I remember correctly. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't remember
more or
the
less.
details off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But more or less, they had like a massive shift in how they saw this kind of stuff. But we're wondering, like, so if you're the outside observer and you're seeing this, right? And these children and these men even don't feel like they are molesting children. They don't feel like they're harming these children. These children are being taught that this is what they're supposed to do to become men. So maybe they don't feel like victims. Is there like an aspect here where if you teach them to do it your way, which is, you don't have little boys sucking men's dicks every day, you're actually harming them, because you're like teaching them that actually, hey, you are a victim by my version of how civilization should be. You have been molested. You are a pedophile. Right? Like, is there like harm being done there? And if there is, should he do it?
Yes, there is harm being done there, clearly. I mean,
Let's-
even if the children lack, or the adults lack, the capacity for informed consent as to what's happening, harm is still being done.
No, I mean, is there harm in explaining to them what's happening? If you're an adult who has
Better a
been,
cruel truth than a comforting delusion, I say.
who's been raised to believe that when you were a child and you had to suck off your uncle every day, that this is just how you become a man. And then you had your son who's going around sucking dicks in the village every day because that's what you thought would make him a man. If someone explained to you and convinced you that actually this is child abuse, right? Aren't you like victimizing those people in some way? Like by explaining to them the awful shit they've been doing, aren't you
By pulling them out
kinda
of
like
Plato's
making that-
cave and revealing that the shadows aren't all of
Basically, yeah.
reality? Yeah, I mean, if you want to say that, but yeah, sorry, reality can be a cruel, cruel truth at times.
Yeah,
Like, that's what I
You're
say.
begging a question really hard, and I'm trying not
Yeah,
to
yeah,
ask
yeah.
it.
I got you. Yes, Doobie, I would agree with you. I think I think you are like exposing the people to abuse, because if they've like completely normalized this experience and so on and so forth, then yeah, they don't view it the way that we do. So then, yeah, they're not even recognizing that. Yeah, they're being like essentially. Well, it's a form of molestation. I don't know how else to say it, but God, I don't know. I guess it's really awkward because I think there is a whole thing about intent and stuff within that. And if all that
Right.
intent and everything is missing, it's hard to call it molestation. You know, it's a little different. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah,
But
but
in
then
that situation,
the
would you
problem
say
with
that?
hiding that
Go ahead, Josh.
information from people, the problem with hiding that information from people is that you are going to continue this practice and continue it to be alive because people are going to continue to believe that, oh, this is the real intent when it really isn't. It was kind of just a lie in order to just keep it on forever and more and more and more. And so what ends up happening is, in the event of trying to protect people from the harsh reality, you are allowing the tradition to do even more harm into the future.
Wait, but you're doing a bunch of work there that we haven't done, right? Like in the sense that like you're
You're
automatically
assuming the harm.
yes, you're assuming the harm. You're assuming
Yeah,
that
I
they're
am.
intentionally doing this, like to be harmful and all that. And I don't think that any of us are doing that because we don't
I
know.
think
Go ahead.
this is what I would say,
I would
and
categorically
obviously
say
this
that
is
like an action like that is like considered harmful.
yeah.
No, no,
So
no, no,
I
no.
would
But
just
no, but
assume
we're talking about the intent, though. Did they intend to do that as a form of harm?
I
Like,
think
were they
well,
doing
like
that?
I could separate intent from the consequence, right?
so. I
Because
would
like
I
I
would
could intend not to kill somebody, but if I kill somebody, like, oh, it's by accident. Well, it's like you still killed somebody. It's still like bad, right?
Yeah, there's
Okay.
actually a way to do this, right? And again, this is, actually from Dr. Walter Block. The way that you do this is, it is only a forestalling of the guardianship's rights of the parents, right? When you can prove that harm has been done that is either permanently psychological or permanently physical, such as any form of surgery that isn't, necessary to save a child's life, any scarring, or any psychological damage that's permanent. If you can prove permanent damage, right, then what you have done is you have engaged in child abuse. But if you can't actually prove permanent damage from this because for whatever reason the cultural context is as such that it doesn't cause psychological damage, we can look at that as disgusting, we can look at that as weird, we can look at that and say you don't go anywhere near my fucking kids, right? But the fact of the matter is that if you can't prove that damage has been done, then there's no forestalling of the guardianship. And so if this culture is that way, to Doobie's other point, the argument that you're making is also, I find it strangely similar to the argument that you hear like amongst Christians and like about like introducing Christianity to the native population, where people are like, well, now that you've told me that God exists, like if I don't accept God, right, then I'm going to hell. Why would you tell me? Right. And so it's kind of an interesting thing here is that like if you tell them that this is abusive to the children and like you inform that it is, even if it may not technically be so, that information in of itself is damaging to the cultural practice. So
Yeah,
the
but
real question
there's
is the damage being done? If
well,
the
there's a
damage
better
isn't being done,
Well,
then
if I may, like
Hold on,
really
place.
quick.
I
There's a
gotta
better
give just a
solution. The better
well,
solution here is not to tell them about any damage being done, and instead just to inform them that like this ritual is unnecessary. Like help them,
yes.
like give them the information that like
Because if they're truly not seeking harm or sexual pleasure and they're informed of the fact that this isn't helping, why would they continue this practice?
absolutely.
well, that's kind of, if I may, is what I was going to get at is like we're talking about, and I wanted to push back on the notion that it's not causing harm, like the harm is informing them. Because if you were to come upon like some native tribe, some very small tribe somewhere in some little corner of the world somewhere, and that tribe does not allow their women to perform any kind of reading or mathematics, and you talk to the women of that tribe and they say, well, no, it's a good thing that women are not allowed to read or perform mathematics. We would all understand that those women, they lack the capacity for informed consent at this point. They have not been given the proper information. So what Fabian's talking about, what Fanatic was touching on there at the very end is like, yeah, education, folks, It is the great gift of God to all of us. So,
but
once you
again,
get a little bit of
natural law
knowledge,
harm,
it goes
though.
a long way.
But again, natural law solves this problem. If the women voluntarily don't want to do this, then there's no problem. If the women are being banned, just like black slaves in America are being murdered or killed for the crime of having been caught to read, then that is violence that is committed upon them. And we have a duty, if they so ask for our help, to stop that. But if they're like, hey, this is the way we do our tribe, this is the way we do our culture, it works for us, and I choose to do
These
this
women would
because
lack the
I'm at
capacity for
home.
informed consent. It's the same reason that we don't consider it valid if a minor consents to an adult sexual advances, because they lack the capacity for informed consent.
So you're saying that grown women lack the capacity for
if their
informed
tribe has
consent.
been for hundreds of years not allowing them to read or do mathematics, it could very well easily be said that in this society they don't have.
I hate to be a leftist here, but like that's the most ethnocentrist shit I've ever heard. Like that's not
that's
a
just
lack
if
of
you have
informed consent.
isolated
You're just
people that are
using that
isolated
word in
long
a
enough, you can get
context where
people
it doesn't work.
propagandized into anything.
Okay, well then I could say all of you lack the ability to vote because you don't have informed consent, because you're all indoctrinated into being statists. Therefore, none of you have the right to vote, and we should violently stop you. Like you could use that logic with anything.
You could believe that.
Yeah, but we would all recognize that as being silly. That's not something
right,
that
which is
all
why I
of us
recognize
kind of
it as being silly.
We
here.
all recognize when somebody lacks the capacity for informed consent, even them thinking that what conditions they're in is good. We all recognize that as being wrong.
Yeah,
we all recognize that they're being propagandized, they're being abused, they're being mentally terrorized into thinking something.
Yeah, to build off what Ko is saying is like that's
bullshit.
like a lot
That's
of
a bullshit lie.
They're trapped by tradition and they don't know otherwise, and to even suggest them to do otherwise, sometimes you'll be faced with backlash of, no, we've been doing this for hundreds of thousands of years, this is ingrained in our tradition, it has been working, look at us, we're just doing just fine. And so then like this is not just like the trap of tradition, but also the trap of ignorance. And I want to echo the sentiment that education is something that can free someone's mind and also, well, their body as well.
Yep.
Getting out of Plato's cave is really good. Now then, I think the question here that Fanatic just said yeah to me, but then I think he disagrees with this one. And I also kind of find it contradictory that we do impose our will onto other people. We do see that we also impose our own morality, our own moral system, set of laws, what is good and right onto other people, regardless if we believe that it shouldn't be done. We do so otherwise. It's called government. That's politics. That's why we have two parties in the United States. But at the end of the day, one is ruling over the other, and sometimes it's all three branches of government, and we kind of just have to deal with it, because that's democracy. That's the way that it was set up, because there's never going to be a time in which we all agree with each other, and so we have to find a way in order to live with the disagreement, and that comes with, well, like the harsh reality of the wills of other people do get imposed onto us. Just like in the case when it comes to the Supreme Court is imposing their will onto the rest of the country, regardless if like 60-80% whatnot, the majority of the country disagrees with that. That's how the system works, and
yeah,
whatnot.
it's a violent and immoral system.
Wait, hold on. The Supreme Court is not imposing their will when it comes to if you're referring to the abortion thing, because the Supreme Court is just
that's just
basically
localization.
saying it's left up to the state, right? They're not imposing anything in there. Besides saying we're not going to impose, we're going to take back our imposition. If you're calling that an imposition, that's crazy to me.
Sure. So the imposition from the Supreme Court. So let me clarify. So then the imposition from the Supreme Court would be their understanding of how to interpret the Constitution.
Well, no,
what?
That's literally their job. That's not an imposition. So you're reaching there. Secondly, I would say
that we got from Wales to Supreme Court.
Secondly, I would say that I don't know why you said that I would be disagreeing with this thing, because one, I don't have the belief system that we're going to be living in some sort of like isolated bubble where we're not going to be imposing our morality on other people.
Well, we have, like, if I'm wrong. I thought you said that you don't.
If I'm going to finish, I'll finish, and then afterwards, then you can interrupt me. Then afterwards, then you can go. So like, there's a thing where, like, for example, like it's an imposition. It's an imposition of our morality to be able to say you can't get revenge on another person, right? Like if a person murders you, like your kid or something, you can't just decide, okay, well, I'm going to murder this person back, right? Like that's an imposition. We're deciding, hey, we think this is not okay. There's no you can't point to some sort of like, so pretty much the vast majority of laws like are an imposition of whatever. So for example, we say you can't speed a certain speed limit. I think I'm perfectly fine driving 80 miles per hour, but the law says I can't. And if I do so, then I'm recklessly endangering other people and so on and so forth. It's all these whatever. We impose our will and our law all the time. What I'm saying is I don't think it's reasonable to like impose our will and our law if there's not a harm being done and without taking into context that other people have their own agency, which might lend them towards certain things that we might find are problematic, but they're not under our jurisdiction. So we have no right or no right or authority to impose on them. People agreeing to live in a society obviously automatically subscribe to the rules and whatever of that society in order for the society to function. But like going to another country that's like self-sustaining that has nothing to do with us on a different continent, that's not part of that process at all.
But I mean, like, don't you see the issue with that logic in the sense that like you're okay with it, you just have an arbitrary line of reasonableness? Like, and this is the problem that I have with people that appreciate the state is like, I'm okay with imposing my will democratically or majorly, and we're gonna create this idea of like we're America. And I think Nebraska over here might be very different than New York's America, right? These are different cultures, different people, different traditions. And hell, if you speak to someone from New York, you might even damn near say a different language. And so the idea that Nebraska has the power or New York has the power to impose their will on other people based off of majority rule or a system of, republicanism that is, mostly majority rule is arbitrary in and of itself. But you're saying, well, this isn't reasonable because it doesn't meet certain criteria. And yet the state over and over again shows that it will violate that criteria as often as it wants, as if it meets the individual's and power's interest.
You're doing that thing where like you're like saying like, well, hey, there's a contradiction here, but I'm not seeing it because to me, like I think the consistency is really this: if you're part of a governing body, then that governing body, or if you're part of a society and a society has certain rules of functioning, like obviously, then I think then you have to agree or live by whatever the rules of are of that society. So at the state level, the state can say, hey, this is what happens and so on and so forth, and this is the way it goes. When the government, like the federal government, gets to govern certain things constitutionally and say we're not going to let you states run wild and harm people and so on and so
right,
forth.
But that logic falls apart. That logic falls apart the moment that you engage with what is a society, especially like once you start looking at the individual and the idea of like whether or not it's okay that society imposes its will on the individual. But let's just look at the idea of society. What happens when this system of governance that you talk about encapsulates the entire world? Does it matter then that a society is different? Because I just laid out two totally different societies: New York City, and the people living in Nebraska. Those are two different societies.
Sure, I got it. So explain. So the people who live in New York have an entirely different society. Like they have there are definitely different degrees of a society, right? Like literally people living in a household are functionally a society, right? But then like within your house you can have specific rules that might not apply to the rest of the state, right? And within that state you might have certain rules that don't apply to the rest of the country, right? And within your country you might have different rules that don't apply to the rest of the world.
Agreed.
Right. So like, yeah, it's just so what you're just expressing to me is that there are different degrees of society, and so that these things end up functioning. I mean, so if we try to look at the rules and engagement of an individual society and then universally apply that, then like we're going to start running into some contradictions. But like, who would do that without recognizing?
But you're already running in a contradiction, because the line of what is and isn't reasonable, once you say that you can tell people what they can do, despite the fact that the individual did not choose to voluntarily do this, is that line can be moved by those in positions of power.
Wait, what do you mean the individual didn't voluntarily choose to do? Like, what are you talking about?
Okay, like if let's say half of the country didn't agree with half of the things, or 90% of the things that the Biden administration wanted to do, for example, they didn't agree voluntarily to do any of those things. Let's say they didn't agree to banning on new leases for oil, right? As just one example, right? That is a form, right, where you're saying, well, it's reasonable. Well, that line of what is and isn't reasonable, to impose the will of a majority or an individual in power against those individuals, is an arbitrary line. And so
Yeah.
that's why I find the problem there is that the real answer here is to not impose your will on individuals unless you do so voluntarily and by your own domain and your own property.
Yeah, I'm gonna
There's no
disagree.
contradiction there.
So we have checks and balances specifically for the situations in which the rest of the country doesn't agree with something that Biden is doing, and the country can come together and like if you have a Senate and a House that's like actually representing the will of the people, and enough people are unhappy about this thing, then they can introduce laws in order to actually
So what
like,
is
change
the
things so that the government
country's
so that they- so
what's
that-
the
so that- so
country's
that- so that-
opinion
so
on
that the
new
president
leases?
doesn't have so that the president doesn't have the ability to just sit here and say I'm running wild with this and this is the way it's going to be, and no one can say anything about it.
What
That's
is
the
the
whole-
country's
that's the whole
opinion
thing.
on that? What is the country's opinion on new leases being granted for oil? What
I
is the
don't know
entire country's opinion?
Scott, my
I don't-
answer to you is it doesn't matter.
I don't think that there is an
We're in
entire
a- we
country
live in a
opinion on that. I don't
representative
think a lot of
democracy.
people compare it. I mean, like really complain about that thing to like a whole level. I don't think it's like
Yeah.
a hot button issue.
Right, yeah. What you're
but what I
avoiding
would-
is that the
No, no,
country
no, no, no.
doesn't have an
I'm gonna
opinion.
finish explaining. I'm gonna
There's-
finish
there's
answering. I'm gonna finish answering your question. and
You're
gonna
not answering my question.
I'm gonna
You're
finish.
dodging.
I'm gonna finish answering your question. You're
I'm
not
gonna
finish. I'm
Are
gonna
you
finish.
fucking-
I'm gonna
are you-
finish. I'm gonna
Are
finish.
you on an album
I'm gonna
with Tech
finish.
Nine?
I'm gonna
Wow.
finish.
Let him go.
I'm
Let
gonna
him
finish. I'm gonna finish answering your question. You're not gonna interrupt me so that I can actually.
Okay,
get to it.
Tech Nina.
So, okay, all right. I'm gonna finish answering your question. You're not gonna interrupt me so that I can go ahead and so we can have a conversation. So what I would say is, I don't know that is like a hot button issue. I don't think a lot of people have opinions on it. Hell, I don't. I don't think that most people are informed about that to have an opinion on it. But I would say if there was a case where people started having a very significant opinion about that thing, then they would probably start doing something about it in order to change it. And I think that's the way that the law is supposed to work. It seems like the system works in a sense that the president can't just do whatever the freak he wanted to do. Trump couldn't like just build his wall without like having like to go through some other processes, right? Like and you saw like he had to end up having to shut down the government because it was like, yeah, no, niggas aren't going to give you what you want. And of course that could like greatly impact his his economy and things like that, which could like negatively impact him. And then there's other things that can be done to still undo the wall. So like yeah, we have a policy in place that basically says that if we don't like the country, if the president just wants to run wild with his power and act a dang fool, then he can, obviously he can be impeached. They can set laws, whatever, in order to like prevent things. So it's not like he just has unequivocal power. So it's, I mean, like,
Yeah, So that was a really, really long gish gallop where you didn't answer anything
Sure.
because you avoided the fact that the simple fact is that representative democracy and all its checks and balances doesn't resolve conflict between individuals and people, and that instead it imposes its will arbitrarily upon people. Now you can say it's not arbitrary because we have representative democracy, but it is arbitrary to the people that are in the minority opinion, or to the people that lack the power to be able to change these systems.
Well, I feel like I answered it pretty accurately. I think anybody else watching.
That's one of the
Let's
reasons
go.
why republicanism is popular in our modern era, is it at least has some sort of protections of the minority against a majority. But I do want to say, Fabian, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, and I mean this with all due respect, this has been ringing in my head for about 20 seconds. Fabian is the man who is a fan of Ancapistan. And yes, I'm sorry. Like I'm just hearing like you just want Ancapistan to ring true. But unfortunately, it's just one of those realities that like I get what you're talking about, Fabian. I do understand entirely, but what you're talking about is when can we get to a beautiful palatial mansion, and we need to move from mud hut to stone hut first. So we're not even close to what you're talking about. So
what you're doing right now, right? Is
you're talking about Ancapistan when that's like 800
I'm
years.
not talking about Ancapistan. What I'm talking about is a philosophy of rights and a philosophy of what is legally descriptively correct under natural law. If you don't like that, then don't invite me to panels. If you just want to have
descriptive under natural law,
yes. If you don't like that,
aren't compatible.
Yes,
at
they
all.
do. Yes, they are.
No, there is no legal writing of natural law.
Yes, there is.
Where natural law comes from is from nature. That's why it's called natural.
That's not where it comes from.
Rights are just the necessary conditions of one's proper existence, no more, no less.
Natural law arguments from God in the Bible and Christianity.
They don't come from any God or any government.
Okay, that's
Okay,
not what.
Finish your point,
that's
Scott, and then I want to hear from Doobie, please.
I don't know what to tell you, but like you're a poli-sci student, maybe you should read some fucking John Locke. That being said,
I had to read John Locke for political science.
All right, we should read some more.
Political theory is under political science. This is a subdiscipline.
Again, I don't know what to tell you. Read Second Treatise on Government again. You seem to have missed a few
I did
things.
do that. I had to as well.
Okay, well, you're wrong. So you're trying to
don't
tie
think
it back to
so.
its historical roots, and then you
Child,
slip
don't
in
take
God
this personal.
because it's a
He just trying to
diaontological
disagree.
argument about.
Child, don't take it
because
personal.
just
Just
being
ignore
it was
Just
the
ignore
the morality of the history of natural law was originally based in deontological values that they believed came from God, but it doesn't come from nature, number one. And number two, that's not the natural law philosophy that I'm talking about in the Rothbardian tradition. That being said, KOE, what you were talking about by saying I'm just engaged in Ancapistan. No, I'm fucking not. I'm talking about what are rights and what should we be doing and how should we be moving forward. And yeah, I'm going to say that we should be moving forward towards my political philosophy. I get that you disagree with that, but to say that I'm engaged in the utopia of Ancapistan when I'm simply talking about where rights come from and what is right and wrong and how we should view our actions towards other people is bullshit. So please finish.
All I'm trying to tell you, Fabian, is I have a lot of sympathies for the way that you're thinking and a lot of your thought process here. But again, the species isn't ready for it yet. So you're somebody that's advocating
name,
for
dog.
like
The
you're trying to
channel's name
advocate
is
for
Fabian
democracy in like
Liberty.
1226. It's like people are just looking like what are you
The
talking
name
about?
is Fabian Liberty. I stole it from Fabian Society. The
Right.
idea
Oh,
is
and by the way,
incrementalism.
everybody within the sound of my voice, he's absolutely right. Murray Rothbard's one of the best fucking economists you could ever listen to. His Econ 101 lectures are required listening, in my personal opinion.
Let's go to Doobie.
First off, you're all fucking nerds. Secondly, I wanted to know,
I
like,
resemble that
I want
remark.
to be super like clear, right? Because I think I misheard. But Fabian and Fanatic, I think you guys were agreeing that, given that it is kind of like, introducing a tribe to Christianity, right? Or I was actually going to use a similar Christian reference about like Adam and Eve, eating from the tree of knowledge and then like realizing that they were naked, right? And being ashamed of it, where before they had been like living in innocence and didn't have any shame of being naked. So given that you guys agree that there is some kind of harm being done to these people by explaining this to them, that explaining it through your perspective, through your worldview, right, based on your system of morality and our civilization's version of like ethics or whatever the fuck, what they are doing is abuse and it is wrong. Are you guys saying that you wouldn't stop them, or you wouldn't impose that morality on them?
I wouldn't. I would not impose that morality on him. What I would do is I'd probably, well, I mean, I would impose, I would do like a soft imposition, which is I would like go and do my best to educate those people and like, hey, this is not necessary and so on and so forth, to discourage the behavior like passively. Because if I aggressively go and like try to tell other people how to live their lives, that they have their own like agency and autonomy, like it seems like it would just probably be like, I expect it to be resisted, right? Like people aren't going to sit here and just be like, oh, you think so? You think this is the way it should be? Okay, good. Then yeah, I'll just go with whatever you're saying. Like why? Why would they do that? In fact, people are going to become really resistant. It's like going into like staying with a friend, staying at a friend's house over like a weekend and be like, you guys, a system of like who uses it, like you guys should really like, they're going to start feeling like, what the freak, who are you and why would you be like trying to be telling us how to live our lives? And that I think can cause violent, it can cause shutdown. They can be very, very resistant. I just don't think that it makes any sense. I think the best key is just to educate them and let them find it on their own.
I would add to what Fanatic is saying in just two simple things. I agree 100% with Fanatic. I would say, number one, I would also be willing to use violence to rescue anyone that wanted out of that situation after their education. If they believed that they were harmed and they could prove some form of harm, I would be perfectly fine bringing in armed people to rescue them from that tribe if they so asked. And if they tried to stop me, tell them to go fuck themselves. You guys are child molesters, and they can get mad about it or whatever, but I'm going to rescue that person if they want to be rescued. And the other thing that I would say, actually, I'll just leave it at that. That I would add that, like, yeah,
that makes sense to me. I could agree with that. Yeah.
Well, okay, so I'm kind of curious now, so like where the line is then, because I think before we said something like, it's not really in our jurisdiction, right, to go around to the rest of the world and say, hey, we don't like this thing you're doing, so you need to stop doing it. I would disagree with that personally. I think that power gives you jurisdiction. Right? So if your nation has a power to do this thing, you can. I think that's all.
Do you think Hitler did anything wrong to the Jews?
Yeah, of course.
But he had power. He had the
Well, I
power to
think
do it.
Yeah, of course. Well, within
Yeah,
his
but it's
like
That's why it
tied with the
happened,
guy's immorality still
Scott.
too. Like, come on,
Like
please.
Doobie isn't he's not saying that like you have power and that means you're right and that means like you
Yeah,
do
I'm saying that
good
it gives you
things.
jurisdiction to impose your version of society or civilization, right? Now there can be other people who disagree with that, who also have power, who can come into conflict with you, which is what the United States did to Hitler, right?
Doobie's
Yeah,
version of
I'm
power is
not
all
saying
about
that
So
I
you
coulda,
think
not shoulda.
you think you're not saying Hitler did nothing wrong. You're saying if Hitler won, he would have done nothing wrong.
I think that's kind of how the world works, really. I think
Oh,
that,
no.
that generally,
Dang.
Dude, fucking
History
bite
is
that
written
bullet.
by the winners.
hold on. I think
Sue
that
me, bro.
generally, hold on.
Jesus.
No, wait, hold on. I'm
Well done,
I'm
Fabian.
being serious with you. There's no, I don't see how this is a bullet. This is just human civilization.
It's a
So
bullet.
we can say in America, right? The United States genocided many indigenous groups, and took their land. But we won, so they're on reservations, and I say fuck them. And as somebody who's like a descendant from one of those indigenous groups, I'm glad the United States won, right? Because now I get to live in a very comfy society, in spite of all the rape and torture and murder that was done to achieve that, right? And so, yeah, I think that's just how human civilization works.
Wow. That's crazy. I would say, while I agree with like his original prescription about power, like does give you whatever some of those parts, certain parts of that. I would also make the statement that I would say that there is going to be like your own morality system that you're going to subscribe to, which is obviously going to be somewhat arbitrary. And I would say that those things also like they have an impact as well. So like, yes, you have the I don't think I have to bite the bullet saying Hitler did nothing wrong. I think instead I would say what Hitler did was wrong, um, and his power gave him the ability to start imposing his will. But the second his will falls out of alignment for what I consider to be moral, then I'm going to say that now he's wrong for doing that thing. And I think that
It's a Fifi's argument.
Wait, but I think that so I
sure,
obviously I'd
if you
agree with
want to
that
call it a
fanatic, right?
Fifi's argument, I would say no. I don't have to be. I think you can logically say like that. This like from a utilitarian standpoint that like, hey, this thing would be harmful or whatever to other people, and so on and so forth. Like that's that.
Yeah, no,
It's
fanatic.
I don't think you could.
Wait, can I explain really quickly? Because
Go
I
ahead.
like obviously like my version of like morality isn't like in line with Hitler's, right? I'm not okay with genociding people, but
Mhm.
I understand and I accept, and I think this is probably like the core disagreement. I don't think that morality comes from like any like natural law or from like God or anything like this, right? I think that there's like
Me
a lot
neither.
of fuzzy stuff happening. Prem, I think your mic's hot. It's
Oh, I'm
lots of
sorry.
fuzzy stuff. It's okay. So yeah, I've just come to accept that what I think is moral and correct is just the result of socialization and the culture that I grew up in, and things I've been exposed to in video games and TV and discussions with people over the years, and my own personal like research and curiosity. But that's it, right? So if Hitler had won, and I grew up in a society that taught me that hey, actually it was okay to massacre all these people, then I might think that, right? And that would just be again how human civilization works.
But that's not the question because the
And it
question
gets back
wasn't.
to my lack of capacity of informed consent point.
No. But that wasn't the question because the question wasn't would he have said he was right. Like that wasn't it. It's would he have been right. And so I think you have to take into consideration whatever your moral precepts and presuppositions are, and you say based off of like my moral system, then yeah, he would have been wrong. Now, could he have lied and said that he was right? Sure. Could the South still lies and says that they were right and just in what in their pursuits to maintain slavery, right? Like they can say that, but we all
Yeah.
know that they're wrong,
Like-
right? So yes, he would have been wrong even if he had won. He would have just
Okay,
lied
but
and
but
said
they're
he wasn't
wrong. They're wrong based on our subjective like construction of like
course.
morality.
Beautiful.
I've
I
always
wanna
looked at
connect your
morality as a
points.
standard of behavior that applies to all people across all time, and so that's
Yeah,
a much more
but I don't think
objective
that
way
makes
of looking
sense.
at
I
it.
think
That's
that
stupid.
That totally
yeah,
makes sense. Just things
No, it
like
doesn't.
slavery, the initiation of the use of force, like
Hey,
rape. These are
no,
all
no,
things that are just
don't list the
wrong
things.
under every
Don't list the
circumstance.
things that actually apply. Like
Well,
list
no,
things that
not under the
probably list the
circumstance of
things that wouldn't
history. Back
apply.
then,
Like how about
slavery was
looking at the
okay.
Well,
things like
people can justify it to themselves how they want, but in reality, it was immoral what they
consent and
did.
how the age of consent wouldn't have been wrong for some people. It wouldn't
So
have
it's
been
a
wrong.
standard of behavior that
It,
applies to
it
all
wouldn't.
people across all time.
It wouldn't have been wrong at an individual level for a person to be like married to a young person. Maybe back in the day, if that was like if that was the standard. I mean, if that was the moral standard. But then as we gain new information, now our standard of behavior changes.
It's just society allowed a little more exploitation back in the day doesn't mean that, it's actually kind of sort of maybe actually good. No, it's just to me, morality is just a standard of behavior that applies to all people across all time. So I mean, like that just is what it is.
It's not that society had more leeway. The difference would be here is that like now we have new information, and that information might like guide our like morality and our system for what's acceptable and what's not. Like maybe things like, for example, like back in the day, like riding people in the back of your pickup truck, like without seatbelts on, right? There was no problem with that. It was perfectly legal, and there wasn't an issue. Or like making
that still goes on around here.
Making homes with asbestos, right? Like there was nothing. It wasn't illegal, right? But we can now say, now that we recognize like the harms that come from these things, it would be a problem. Or a better example, smoking cigarettes. Secondhand smoke wasn't thought to be harmful. People were allowed to smoke in freaking hospitals, like around pregnant people, around children, right? At schools, things like that. But now we know these things are harmful. So now we would say, based off of the information we have now, that we shouldn't be doing these things. So morality does change. Morality is going to be based off of the information and whether or not we can track it to certain harm. So then just having a standard now and having a standard now and not being able to look back and recognize that other people who didn't have that information would not have the same standard just seems like complete ignorance.
They had to exist in the world that they were, but there's a lot of moral concessions that we have to make even in our modern day.
Fanatic, the problem with that is
Scott and then Doobie.
Fanatic, the issue with this is that you're engaging in this conversation as if utilitarianism or like some consequentialism is the only means by which of engaging in a conversation on normative ethics, right? Nope. Deontological principles don't change. Virtue ethics can change based off of what virtues a society deems better. But even the issue with your example of constantly saying new information changes what is right and wrong. Well, first of all, that means that you're admitting that there is no universal right or wrong, right? And therefore imposing morality on other people is already an issue, full stop, because you've already admitted that what is right and wrong can change. So what you're really engaging in is a form of like rule consequentialism, where you're kind of discovering, principles or axioms, maybe kind of, not really, but kind of in your form of consequentialism. The problem with that is that you don't have a crystal ball. You can't see into the future. So for example, when talking about age of consent, you can say, well, we've discovered, right, that it's wrong to be married to a 15-year-old girl. But what if a meteor comes and wipes out almost all of human civilization and there is an extremely small amount of humans left? All of a sudden then the age of consent would be morally wrong to impose that because we've got to get our birth rates up or the human race will not survive, right? So like you can't engage in saying new information changes what those morals are unless you admit that there is no objective morality, that morality is completely subjective from person to person. And if you want to engage in that, that's fine, but you can't make positions saying this is morally right and this is morally wrong, because that's only your opinion. And therefore you either have to default to Doobie's version of might makes right, and therefore we will use our might to force our subjective opinion of morality on others, or B, you have to come to my position and understand that you should separate those morals and assume the non-aggression principle and decide that Hitler, whether you want to say he's morally right or wrong, what you can say is he's legally a criminal because he committed acts of violence and theft and genocide, and that those things are against the non-aggression principle. And actually, you can't argue against it because to do so would violate the precepts of argumentation ethics. Those are the only two positions you can have.
I disagree with the very first thing you said. One, deontological laws do change over time. Like deontology can be literally just subscribing to something like the Bible. I'm saying, well, the Bible.
Someone can have different.
Let me think, bro. Come on, you just went on a while, and I didn't say a word. Shut up. Jesus.
Right, but you're just saying
shut up. You said a whole bunch of nonsense, and I sat there as you went with your drivel, and I didn't say a word. Shut up. Let me talk. Jesus. What the freak? Anyway, so like obviously, like so maybe like a deontological principle could be something like subscription to like the Bible, right? And thinking to yourself like, oh, well, the Bible says this and so on and so forth. But we can get new editions of the Bible, right? The Bible itself can change. People and like, for example, people like freaking Jehovah's Witnesses, they got like 4 or 5 different editions, right? Like, or you can have like an Old Testament and a New Testament, right? Like, there's plenty of things that you can do where you can have brand new exegetes, like in Islam, that like give you like new whatever, so that you have like new understanding of the laws, and then those things change, right? Like, it wasn't like the Quran is it's not like the Quran is the only thing. So first off, that statement, deontological like laws don't change, it's just absolutely wrong. Secondly, when you start talking about like the new, secondly, when you start talking about, nigga, you can't help but interrupt. I'm just gonna mute you. Secondly, when you start talking about like the new the like, oh, the like the meteor comes and wipes out half of the whatever, so on and so forth, right? Now new information might cause those things to change. This is how you like, this is where you get like different deontological movies, I mean, I'm sorry, dystopian movies, right? Where you have like these ideas where it's like there's some sort of catastrophic event which causes people to have to react in a specific way, which can result in some sort of like harms, like some sort of society where we say, oh, this seems a little like gross, like it seems like the way that they're like manipulating people or doing whatever the frick they're doing is wrong. I think this is one of those situations where like, hey, if we are now at a place where we have to like, for the survival of humanity, like take away certain people's freedoms and certain people's choices and things like that, yeah, then those are decisions that we make. That's the new information. So it seems like, yeah, the new information would change things. So it sounds like we're agreeing still.
No, we're not agreeing. And first and foremost, I'll be real quick and just let it down. First of all, deontological positions don't change. New systems and new deontological beliefs might occur, and then people adopt that form of deontology. That is not the same thing. Like, to say that a new religion is born, therefore Christianity's morality changed, is just wrong. Okay.
That's not what I said at all.
You absolutely did say that. First of all.
Okay.
Second of all, no, the core principles did not change, which is hilarious. But even if they did, it wouldn't matter because it would be a new religion, right? Like, Christianity is not the same thing as Judaism. These are two different deontological positions because they have different beliefs, right? That's why Christians and Jews are not the exact same thing. Second of all, you completely circumnavigated the entire issue that I brought up with consequentialism. You completely circumnavigated all the points that I made and then just dismissed it as nonsense because, I don't know, either you can't contend with it intellectually or because you don't want to. One way or the other, that's what you did. So it's just, yeah, I mean, like, I think your non-answer will suffice for the audience to know that I'm right and you're wrong.
That's fine. Okay. DB, please.
Well, maybe it's a nitpick, right? But I don't think that the issue is new information. Like, for example, I was in a debate this past weekend, yesterday, the day before yesterday, I can't remember, one of these days, with like Nick Fuentes, right? And it was about like this war, whether or not there's a war on men, right? And Nick and the other guy that the other people that were with him have a very like specific view of like women's role in society that they say comes from the Bible, but I don't think it does. But there's no like new information that could be provided to them, I think, right? Because they have access to the internet, they have access. They were raised in this culture that taught them about, women having some form of like equality, social equality, the ability to work, et cetera, et cetera. But they disagree, right? They have a preference that women are in the home, raising the children, et cetera, et cetera. And that's it, right? They don't care about new information. They disagree with the new information. They would say that even if there's some kind of like benefit to like productivity benefit to the workplace, women should still be out of the workplace because it's not their place, right? Their place is in the home raising the children. And we could look to countries in the Middle East where in many of these countries, it's totally socially acceptable to, for a 50-year-old man to marry a child, right? To have arranged marriages where, grown-ass men are marrying like 10-year-olds and sleeping with them or just outright purchasing them from their parents. Right. I don't think the issue is new information. I think the issue is like a fundamental disagreement on the framework of what makes up like their moral system. Right. So I think that I don't know if it makes sense to say, hey, we're gonna educate these people out of having, child wives and shit like this. It seems more like, to me anyway, like I would say, if we had the ability to hey, you don't get to have child wives anymore, not because it's objectively wrong, but because we believe it's wrong, because we have the ability to impose this upon you, and if you do it, you're gonna be punished. I think that's enough. I don't think you need to educate these people out of this. I don't think the issue is education in a lot of these cases. It's literally just like a disagreement on like preferences.
Yeah, the might makes right isn't turned out too well in history. But J Chow, real quick, are you I haven't heard a lot from you. Are you just trying to catch your breath while you're wearing that fucking face diaper?
No, I just can't get in. I think you guys are more interested in yelling over each other and not actually agreeing to some sort of a conclusion or like a marriage between the two ideas. Because I actually think like the argument between you and Fnatic, it's not that far apart, and like how Ko's understanding of like what is right or wrong and with Doobie is also not that far apart. But I think there's just like an issue of I don't know, constant disagreement.
Wait, no, Jay Chow, don't label us all
Interesting.
that way. That's just him. Like I wasn't trying to yell over him. He went on a long soliloquy in which the opening line he gave was specifically that deontological rules don't change. I obviously disagreed with that and gave three different examples of that. But I waited until he was done with everything else. And I addressed that point, and then I addressed his next point, and then I addressed his next point. I'm not just trying to just disagree with niggas just to disagree with niggas. I'm actually listening and engaging in a conversation. This nigga is the one that just wants to talk over everybody and just wants to disagree because he just wants to go ahead and tweak his nipples about like his ANCAP dream, which will never happen because
I
enough
really
of
don't
people in
want
this
to get
country are
really
saying
meta
it.
with this, but like you're already like being really combative with how you describe Fabian Liberty. So like
Yes,
I
I'm
kind of
being
already see
combative
that.
because of what he did in response to what he did
Okay.
originally, like with interrupting me
Uh,
nonstop. If
okay.
you can't
So kind of.
if you can't see what actually happened there, then yeah, I guess maybe you can maintain your erroneous position
Okay,
that we
okay,
just want to
okay.
argue.
So
That's fine.
now the well is poisoned between you and me. But I'm gonna
Sure,
have to
that's
agree.
fine.
I think Fabian Liberty has the right approach to what it is, what it means to be how to understand deontological norms. Deontological norms are based on rules as well as duty. When you say that murder is always wrong, the always means in the past, in the present, and in the future, it is always wrong. And then for you to change your mind to say like, oh, murder is no longer wrong because maybe there's like a new book, a new testament, or whatnot. That doesn't mean that the deontological norm changes. It means you just switch to a different deontological. Maybe you go in the reverse. Oh, murder is no longer always wrong, and things like that. And I think, like, to get to the larger point, the best way to view and explain morality while you're considering history, because in different points in time, we have different understandings, we have different knowledge. Taking that point from you, I agree with that. We have a different understanding of what is right and wrong, and even in this day, when I think like Fanatic, you kind of like a bit of psychoanalyze. Fana, do you think like you are like morally a good person?
Um, I mean, I guess it's really rough because like as a Christian, like I think we all make mistakes, and I think the Bible very makes it pretty clear where it says none are good except for God the Father. Like Jesus Himself said those
Hmm.
words. So I don't know. It's kind of it's a difficult thing to say. I mean, what do you mean by morally good person? Define
Well,
it, please.
how about this? Like, and instead of like using you as in context, I feel like a lot of people think that themselves today are like morally good people. Now, that doesn't mean that they're perfect, but like they have an understanding of what is good and they replicate that as much as possible. And even when like they do bad things, they'll say like, no, I'm still doing good things because of X, Y, and Z. They'll try to explain themselves, and we'll have disagreements over and over again. But then there might be a time in the future, maybe 100 years later, 1,000 years later, where all of a sudden an entire society agrees that what we were doing that we thought was good is actually like abjectly horrifying. It deserves to be punished in like the greatest depths of hell and whatnot. Like back then, a lot of people thought that slavery was pretty pog, and that's why it was done. They even made more arguments as to why it was pog. But then time has transversed, and we know better and whatnot. We could continuously say that we've updated our morality to say that, okay, well, back then that was wrong. And so then this kind
No,
of leads me to believe that when it comes to morality, really the best way to understand it is that it is subjective. And that like in order to convince and to kind of like spread our moral system in order to in our minds for our own goals maximize the morality in the world, then in a way we do have to impose onto other groups of people, other cultures and whatnot.
So I would say that one, I don't think that it was like a common belief that slavery was good. I think there were some people who were in positions of power who were arguing that slavery was good and being as disingenuous as possible in order to maintain their power so that they could actually maximize their profits. Because I think they did know that it was good, and I think they were also very afraid of the fact that like it would eventually become knowledge that this thing was problematic, and then they would lose that power. So they did so many things in order to like continue to like make people not see black people as humans during that time, even though they obviously knew they were humans. If they didn't have that fear, then they wouldn't have been making laws such as like if you can't educate them, because they knew that if you taught them to read, then now they would actually start having better reasoning and better arguments for why what their conditions were unfair and unsafe and so on and so forth. And so I think they knew. I think they just wanted to maintain their power. Secondly, I would say deontology isn't just like subscription towards like again, deontology can be like subscription to any sort of laws, right? Again, subscription to the Bible would be a deontological belief. I have a lot of deontological beliefs as a practicing Christian. So like, but I also recognize that like living in a society that I'm probably going to have to abandon some of those when it comes to like communing with other people. And so I would think that the idea that like deontology can't change. I don't understand how you could say that Fabian Liberty is right in saying that deontology doesn't change.
No,
When, again,
because your
hold on, let
deontology.
me finish. Let me finish.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
When again we have all these examples, like for example in Islam, where they had a deontological principles based on their books, and then those things changed. Or when you look at like Jehovah's Witnesses, where they had a book that said something, and then later on that thing changed, and then they're still part of the same religion. Or you look at Mormons, or I mean, Lord, I mean, just think of a lot of religions have changed over time. The Catholic Church changes over time. So, like the idea that like deontological principles don't change is just it's crazy. Of course, these things like change over time, and they're still part of the same organizations. I don't know how you could say that that's correct.
I don't understand why
So,
you won't
hold
just
on,
take the L here.
I gotta.
You're just
I was
wrong.
talking to Fabian. Jay Chow was talking to you. Can you respond, please?
So Jay Chow respond, but I do want to get KOE in here soon. Okay.
You're such a hurt little bitch.
That's what I am. Jay Chow, can you please respond, please?
Yeah, so then your deontological belief isn't actually changing. What's changing is what the deontological belief is telling you to do. So if your deontological belief is, oh, I believe in the Bible and what the Bible says, okay, well, sometimes the Bible could change or your religion could change. That's your argument as to what you're following may change, but not the actual rule of, oh, I believe in the Bible and what the Bible is saying. So then another example would be, okay, I'm a child and I have the deontological belief that the parents is always right, so I always follow them. Well, sometimes parents could, no, not something, always parents are inconsistent. They will have double standards and they will do what they seems fit. But no, okay, but I'm just like, okay, even though you've changed your mind, even though you're saying something different from one day to another, I still hold the deontological belief that you are right, and I'm going to follow what you're going to say. So that's kind of like what you're bringing up is like you're confusing the actual rule with what you have to follow.
No, so what you're saying
with the identity.
So if I may,
one second.
If I may,
hold on a second. Yeah, I want to let KOE in, and you can respond to all of it afterwards. I just gotta let some other people in. Go ahead.
Stupid.
Thank you, good sir. But a couple of things I wanted to. One thing I wanted to push back on with you, Jay Chow, and one thing I was actually going to agree with you here. One thing I need to push back heavily, sir, is it's not it's Phil KOE of KOE Nation on YouTube. You can say whatever you like about me, just get the name right, good sir. But that's the one thing I had to push back on heavy. But the one thing I'm going to agree with you here, there is oh, come on, I am never above shameless self-promotion. Come on now. But what I do have to agree with you here is there seems to be a very odd, almost agreement in philosophies, but like heavy walls because of personalities happening in this discussion. Like with Fabian and Fanatic, at first there was actually, it seemed like some actual agreement here, and then there was a personality clash, and then that's when, and like me and Doobie, he loves me. He and I, we're like a box of fluffy doves together. We get along like oil and water. It's great. But like, so I understand what you're getting at there. but it's kind of the unusual thing that happens when you get on these panels is ideology and politics makes for odd bedfellows. And one last thing I wanted to talk about is like Fanatic, you were talking about there was people that probably wanted to get rid of slavery a long time ago. Oh yes, absolutely. There were abolitionists in the 1400s that were thinking we need to get rid of slavery. But this is also kind of a point that I wanted to make to you, Fabian, is when you're talking about getting rid of the state. When you were somebody that was advocating for the end of slavery in 1400, people were like, well, how will the crops even be brought in? And if you were to say, well, you see, we've got these incredible machines that are going to be invented because we're going to have a huge explosion in the cost of labor. And so you're going to have a huge explosion of labor saving devices. And so we're going to have these machines that just suck up all the crops. They're going to be fueled by crushed up dinosaur bones that we suck out of the ground. And that's what the future is going to look like once you get rid of slavery. That would sound like a non-answer, and they would wonder what kind of drugs you were on, because you can't really tell what's the future going to look like. And also, and that's what I mean when I say like you advocating for what you are. It's kind of like saying, well, if you want to get rid of a state, well, how is the road going to be fucking built? Well, the answer would sound like a non-answer. And so to me, like what ended up winning the day with slavery was the moral argument. It was these are children of God, every one of them. They cannot be owned. They are children of God like you, children of God like me. So it wasn't some utilitarian argument. It was the argument for morality that ended up winning. And with that, Fanatic, I'll yield to you and let you respond.
Can I respond to what he said to me, the straw man of
I'm not strawmanning you. I'm just telling you, like, species ain't ready for it.
Go ahead. It's all yours, buddy.
Look, I'll try and be quick. I know you got your new beef. So no, that's just not the answer that anarchists gave in the 1800s. It's not the answer that the anarchists gave in the 1900s, right? We were always against slavery, and we were always making the moral argument, and that's just the historical fact. So we already have that example, right?
What I'm saying is the argument of getting rid of slavery then is a lot like your argument for getting rid of the state now. Is like it's just seen as so alien as where we are as a species right now. It just isn't going to compute. I'm not arguing with you. I'm just trying to tell you that's how it is in the world we are right now, unfortunately, like it or not.
I am making not quite the moral argument. I am making the descriptive legal argument as to why these things shouldn't be done if we have the moral imposition to avoid conflict. If you have a moral imposition, if you don't have a moral imposition to avoid conflict, then you can't argue with me about it, because I'm not getting into argumentation ethics. We can talk about that if you ever want to come hang out on my channel for it. But the fact of the matter is that we've always made that moral argument as anarchists, and I would do so now. And that is the argument that I think will win. And I think once people understand philosophy and we can bring people over to that, we will understand why these not philosophically grounded positions are so fucking hilarious that are being said here. Like this idea that deontology can shift and change, which it can't, or, you know what I mean? Like your identity of things can change, but deontological beliefs can't. And if they do, then you're adopting a new deontological system. That's just definitionally true. It really shouldn't be arguing about it on this panel. It's so far away from Faroese whaling, which I wanted to talk about, but whatever.
Fanatic?
I don't got anything to say to that. You good? We're good. Keep going.
You want nothing to J Chow or anything?
No, I don't remember what he said. It's fine.
Okay.
Rock and roll. Well, how about them whales, huh? Boy, we sure.
Yeah, so then like trying to take like what I've said to apply onto the island and the dolphin killing. If people feel like they want to protest, then I fully support that, and that shouldn't be repressed. Now, like if it suddenly gets violent, then I think that changes, and maybe I'll be more okay with what Scott was saying earlier of, okay, island goers, you could take up arms and start doing stuff. Instead of spearing dolphins, you could, I guess, spear humans. I don't know. But then it all goes back down to, well, we all have different understandings of morality, and we all have this urge to want to maximize the good in the world. Now, I think while that is okay and that's like a good intention and that's something that I would want all people to kind of strive for, I think another element that we also have to consider and kind of what Fnatic was pointing out to before a little bit was how can we do that in the most effective way? Because kind of just being a woke skull or just like the typical environmentalist that you see getting cringe compilations on YouTube or whatnot is probably not going to be working out. As what Fnatic said, you're very likely to be met with backlash and not actually being able to reach an understanding of, hey, this is harmful, and like maybe you should like reconsider what you're doing and whatnot. And because that's how you're actually going to be able to maximize good, which then I'm just going to stop there.
So okay, yeah, we did get way off, but like you guys were having interesting discussion, so I was fine with it. But for the remaining time we have, yeah, it was interesting. It was fun. For the remaining time that we have on this topic, I want to talk about something that Scott brought up a way long time ago, talking about a Japanese whaling, right? And how like there has been a massive push from the West, a massive push to get them to knock that shit off. And if the Japanese, right, and I believe this is so, but I could be wrong. But if the Japanese happen to be doing a certain level of harm, meaning that the whales were endangered, then we would impose our morality. Right, like, I think everyone agrees there, right?
No. I would kill every fucking whale to make one child smile. If I could prove that it would do no harm to humans and it would do help to humans, I don't give a fuck. I'd kill them all. It would do harm to humans because it would damage the fucking ecosystem and it would do all these other things, right? But like, I don't give a fuck about whales. They don't have personhood. I give a fuck about humans.
So you don't think? Go ahead.
I can at least respect the consistency. I got it. Like it's within a consistent framework. Like I don't personally agree with that idea personally.
For like ever.
I'm a farmer. I grow life for a living, so it's like now we all need each other. Trust me. Like it's, but I understand. Like to me, it's the paradox of life is that even if you're a vegan, if you're a strict vegan, plant life is still life. And it's the odd paradox of life, whether you try to make moral concessions or try to make moral stands on it, is that life must consume life in order to sustain life. That is the paradox of life. And so to me personally, I find this practice unusual, but it's a cultural, it's what they do. And it's what their whaling traditions, probably going back to one of the oldest traditions in humanity, because I mean, you could go back to records that go into time in memoriam for it. But to me, as long as they're not like affecting the ecosystem, I think like, cause I used to watch the Sea Shepherd show, the Whale Wars show. And I just used to love watching the escalation of each season. Like, okay, the Japanese whalers got all this stuff and now the Whale Wars people got this stuff. And that always kind of fascinated me watching that part of it. And so long as it's like a cat and mouse and nobody's getting hurt, God bless with, God bless with everything on that regard. But so long as nobody gets hurt, like, yeah, the protesters can do their protesting in the goddamn Arctic if you want to go to the fucking Arctic. Jesus.
I think there's a better question. And I think this might be what people are intuitively shocked by, right? And I think the better question is the abuse of animals something that psychologically transfers into the way that humans treat each other? Because I think that's the real question that like people are picking up on. Because I mean, sure, you're going to have whale wars people. You're going to have whale wars people that are like, oh my God, the pretty little dolphins, they deserve life and they think like animals deserve rights, right? Those people are going to be like your fringe fucking watermelons, right? Green on the outside, red on the inside, whatever. But like, I think for a lot of people that see this and they go, that's barbaric. I don't like that. because they see so much like they see the way that it occurs. They see like the joy in killing, right? They see the seas run red with blood and think, how can those people not think this is wrong? I think what they're picking up on, their intuition might possibly be picking up on, is a concept that by acting so aggressively towards something so aesthetically pleasing, this cute animal, right? Or this thing that we think of as like kind of smart, because we look at dolphins as some of the smarter animals in the animal kingdom. What they're really picking up on is if they treat these sweet little innocent creatures like that, what does that do psychologically in the way that they treat other humans? And I think that might be what people's real aversion is, more so than the idea of like hurting the dolphin.
So
Well,
you think
to me,
Wait,
it's one of
people
those things that
reverse to
unfortunately an
like
act of hate and an act of love can sometimes be the same act. It can seem like it's very hateful when you kill the deer, but it's an act of love to provide food for your family. And so, like, I'm curious, has anybody in this panel ever taken part in butchery of their own meat before? Has anybody on this panel ever done that?
Done
I
what? I'm sorry.
I bought
Yeah,
meat
taken part of
before
butchery of your
done
own
it.
meat. Like
Yeah.
I've butchered my own
Yeah.
meat before. Like, yeah. And so like to me, like that's just one of those things like, yes, it can be a bit of a gory thing at the moment, but that's what I mean when I say in the moment, there are moments in this life where an act of hate and an act of love can seem like the very same act. And so like when I go hunting or when I help butcher somebody's hog or a cow or something, like I'm always very appreciative of the meat. And it's always I don't want to say like almost a pseudo religious experience when you go like, thank you for what you're about to provide for me for the year. And so I could very much understand like even the people in this Pharaoh Island having a very similar experience with their
For
pirate
sure.
whales and their dolphin. Like, if it's
Pilot.
part of your hunting experience, it's part of the way that you sustain yourself. And this is one thing that like a lot of people get wrong when they're trying to wag their fingers at each other in today's modern world. And it's the idea that what people put in their body and eat is such a tremendously intimate and personal experience. It really is one of those, who the fuck are you to say what the fuck, so when people try to say, no, you shouldn't eat that, you should eat this, it really is a, who the fuck are you? Like what people eat is one of the most intimate and personal experiences that a person can have in their day. And so it's one of those, to me, if the folks in Japan, so long as they're not damaging the ecosystem and they're playing cat and mouse with protesters in the Arctic and they're just, that's how they're doing it, fair, have at it. That's the way they're doing it. If the folks on the Faroe Islands,
what about cannibals? Human cannibals?
Oh, geez, we don't have to go there.
It's
so
it's
wait, so
intimate.
you're asking me why? Well, because humans are of a creature of volitional consciousness, and animals are a creature of automatic instinct.
Just say they're a
and
moral
humans-
agent. It's easier. Just say they're a moral agent.
Yeah. I mean, I was gonna take about 10 minutes to get there, but yes. The morality is a human construct, and it applies to humans. It's a human
animals
concept.
also have their own
Animals
constructs
and
as
tables
well.
and chairs and animals know not what they do. Can you show me an animal that can demonstrate knowledge that goes beyond its natural instincts, in which when it fails, it will die? Can you show me an animal that does that?
What?
Any animal,
Say that again?
its knowledge will only keep it alive for as long as its instincts, its natural instincts are ingrained into it. And that is as long as the animal will survive. The moment its instincts fail it, it will die. Can you show me any animal that can do anything for beyond that?
Who does?
I'll wait.
What animal
I'll
does
wait.
that?
I'll wait.
Do humans
I
do
think
that,
it's like-
or do all animals do that? I'm still confused.
I think he's saying that humans do that.
No,
Fanatic,
Yeah,
go ahead.
humans are the only creature of volitional consciousness. We can actually choose our own destruction every day, but we don't.
Fanatic.
What? Wait, animals
Yeah.
could also do that as well.
No, they can't.
No, they don't.
No, they
How-
can't.
how- how
They're
they
they're
can't?
creatures of automatic instinct.
Yeah,
Show me an
You don't
animal
think- you
that's
don't think
committing
animals
willing,
make choices? I
Let's
mean,
go-
like we also have instincts as well.
not beyond what their instincts are ingrained in their DNA.
Well, I'm not sure about that, because you see dogs will like stay at the grave of their owner, and then like
Oh yeah,
die
I've got a
there.
really nice dog, really loyal, comes right to me every day, like all the time. I feed it. That's
Yeah.
why.
Yeah,
Okay,
but,
like,
they'll
It
just
is
die.
an animal. Okay, and
Oh.
like what? Unfortunately,
Yeah,
what
and
happens is
our
people like to
instincts is when we get
anthropomorphize
hungry, we get
animals.
I won't die on this hill, unlike that dog. But like Fanatic, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say that I do think that like we do start like when you ask that who are you? Well, first off, I, I think you're doing some fast and loose here, like because when no one's looking at like a person butchering, or most people, like I can't say no one because there are the insane PETA people. We shouldn't be looking at like the butchering of an animal as like an act of hate. It sounds crazy as freak. People are doing it because they want to eat. And I think and anyone that's calling it an act of hate is just like is a psychoactivist that just doesn't like want to live in reality, and they're just trying to emotionally trigger you and like emotionally bully you into like going with whatever the freak that they're saying. Secondly, I'd say that we do like have like the reason why we typically tell like we start getting involved with what other people are eating is because we do assign some sort of emotional thing to like pets, right? Like because like dogs are so domesticated and and they're pets in this society, then in this society we tend to like look down upon people that would eat a dog, right? Like that's it, and it makes sense. It's like, yo, that's our pets. We've always looked at them as such. So I think in the same sense, when you see someone eating or doing something that you think is inappropriate, it makes sense why you would like step in there, right? Like, because it's like, well, you're eating this thing that we look at it like we look at it like a person, because the more something is like intertwined within our culture. Sorry, I'm trying to make decisions in this game at the same time while I'm playing. But the more something is intertwined within our culture, then the more like emotional attachment we have to it. Like I value dogs because like we've always had dogs. I don't value cats because I grew up without cats. And so other people who have had dogs or whatever their entire life, or who have had cats their whole life, might be love cats and hate dogs and so on and so forth. I didn't really value dolphins in the same sense until I started learning about dolphins and how insanely intelligent they are. And the more intelligent I recognized that they were, the more it was like, hey, these things are pretty cool, and we probably shouldn't be eating them, right? I think it makes sense for us just as a society to do that. We value the things that resemble us. And so the more sentient something seems, then the more we're going to value it. Plants, they're not sentient, so that's why we don't care for them.
Well, I don't know if you know this. In China, I forget the province, but there actually is a dog meat festival that they have every year in some place, and they eat and so that's one of those things. Like, okay, are we gonna push back on that as well? Are we gonna
Oh,
how
that had to
far do we
be
take
like
that?
Yeah,
Like,
we do
China
push
put
back
rules
on it.
against it because of COVID.
Yeah, but it's one of those you think in the rural areas, people are going to do what they're going to do. I mean, it's kind of like
Oh,
what
of
happened
course,
around
yeah.
here in Nebraska. In the rural areas, people just kind of did what they were going to do. Like, there wasn't really, like, and so, like, it's
Yeah,
a
and
really
then
big
like we eat
controversy, and I
pigs,
hope
and then other
me as
people
just a
across the
dog
world
owner,
think that
it's,
like
oh, go ahead.
cows or pigs are like sacred. So then like that's also true for us as well.
I mean,
I
I don't
didn't
know
catch
that
the
I
first
don't
part of
know
that
that
sentence.
like
Sorry.
how intelligent an animal here is really the question, right? The question is the animal a moral agent? Is the animal able to be held responsible for its decisions because of its ability to be able to discern right from wrong?
No,
Do you know any animals that have that capacity?
Well, it's not
no.
about them believing what is right or wrong and then choosing what is right or wrong. Um,
Well,
I,
then
I
you're
know
just
I know
circumnavigating the
there are
moral agent.
I know there are. Well, I mean, like if you're understanding it via moral agency, then I can
Yeah.
see how that works. But um, the other route is, instead of viewing it under the lens of moral agency, why
Okay.
not we view sentientism under the lens of whether or not they're able to feel emotion or pain, happiness, love, sadness, and things like that. So then all of a sudden, what it comes down to is, okay, now it's up to us to be the moral agents to not cause that pain onto other animals. That's what I've heard.
Okay. Why is pain wrong?
Would you want to get hurt?
Depends on the situation.
Well, if you had to choose,
How
would you want
adventurous do you
to?
get on the weekend?
Again, it depends on the situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I might be a
yeah,
masochist. I might enjoy getting hurt.
It's like a bad pain. It's a pain you don't want to have. It's not
It's
going
a
to give you
bad
pleasure.
pain.
It's
So
gonna
even when
give
you
you
try and
pain.
so it's a bad pain. So even when you try and circumnavigate the argument of
I
moral
guess
agency,
so.
the only thing you have to go back into the moral framework, because we're
Yeah,
talking about
I'm very sure
that's
like dogs don't want to get beaten, cats don't want to get beaten, and like I've kind of seen the videos of them being scared of other humans because they were abused. I also think that like animals going into slaughterhouses don't want to go there. I've also seen videos of them trying to run away in the other direction of them getting pointed to the slaughterhouse because they don't want to die and things like that.
Does a
So
mosquito want
like,
to die?
oh, probably not.
Right. So should you just let the mosquito suck your blood and give you malaria?
Well, see, but then now you're and
Let's say it doesn't
personally,
give you
I would
malaria,
say no.
right?
I
It
mean,
doesn't get
me
you
personally,
sick,
I would say no.
right? Like it's not going to give you malaria. Like is it a moral evil? Are you a Jainist? Like, do you think it's a moral evil to slap the mosquito
Well,
in your arm?
I'm not arguing from myself. I'm arguing from what I've heard from other people, and that's just
Alright,
like a
well,
different route to take. So like, if you want to argue with them about, I guess
I
like
mean, fair enough. If
mosquitoes,
it's not your position, then questioning your position isn't that helpful. And I'll just
yeah,
reassert that it's moral agency
uh-huh.
is the question here, because when asked about it, you eventually revert back to the understanding of morality in terms of your
Well,
description of
like
pain.
in terms of like who has the agency in order to take action, and when I read certain moral agency into the framework that I was talking about, I put it in the context of it's up to us to be that moral agent to not spread that harm and to not spread that pain onto other animals, perhaps.
But why is it wrong morally, right, to cause pain? Like, because it seems that you've used a utilitarian calculus, right, throughout our conversation involving ethics, right? So it seems to me like if that is the position, I'm not going to sit here and attack utilitarianism. I'm actually going to use your moral framework. If that is your moral framework, and the idea here is harm reduction, why is harm reduction applying to animals? How many humans are you willing to sacrifice? How many children are you willing to kill to save how many dogs?
Oh, me
Ooh.
personally, I would have a hierarchy. So what KOE was talking about before, that life eats
You said you'd
life.
have a hierarchy. So how
Um,
many children for how many dogs?
no amount of children for no amount of dogs. I kind of
Ah,
I'm kind of like more of a humanist than like I would be a sentiist, and yeah, that would be my personal hierarchy.
right.
But I think
Human values and
for
human
people who are
happiness
going down the other,
would
Well,
always supersede animal values and animal happiness, right? And so the question
that's right.
here is, so you're not willing to sacrifice one human for the entirety of all dogs on earth if we could prove that it wouldn't like cause harm to humans because like their pets
No,
disappeared,
but then I
etc.
would say that that's unnecessary. Like it is not necessary for that one person to get so much happiness from the destruction of all dogs.
I
Like
well,
it's
mean,
if
kind of
I
like
may,
it's kind of like, okay, well,
okay.
Hitler would have been happy with the eradication of all Jews, and if we took the hierarchy that Jews were below Aryans, then would you make that sacrifice in order to make one person named Hitler happy?
Well, I would reject the framework that there's a hierarchy of
oh,
humans.
And
well,
that's exactly what the 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 other people that I'm kind of like pseudo arguing for would also say, is that like they would reject that hierarchy. We would not take that utilitarian
Right.
game
So
well,
of
your
if I may,
answer
just
is you're
real
willing
quick,
to
is
accept
I
some
think
loss of human happiness.
I think Fabian, this is a much more useful way to ask this question, and I'm not like trying to be confrontational here, but
No,
I
go
think this
ahead.
is one of those where it does kind of boil down. So rather than the way that Fabian's posing a question, I think we would all kind of agree if this was the hypothetical. You're running into a burning building, and it's your good friend's house, and you've got a chance to save their dog or their kid, and you only got a chance to save one. I think we would all, like, even your good friend would much more appreciate you bringing out the kid than the dog. I think we all kind of understand that, like, yeah, get the kid, and if you had to pick one, you can only pick one. I know it's a terrible hypothetical,
I think
but
we all get it.
it happens all the fucking time. This is happening somewhere in the world right fucking now as we speak, unfortunately. And so it's not like the lifeboat scenarios of what happens if a meteor hits the earth, and kind of like these are the real fucking decisions that people have to make in our real life. I think we all recognize, yeah, you get the kid.
yeah,
Well,
but this
I think we already
doesn't
got that
but like this
concept.
doesn't lead down to, okay, now we should be able to slaughter all animals. Like we could also apply that scenario to the Titanic during
I think the correct answer
the
is it depends on the human. There are plenty of humans that I'd killed in favor of my dog, right? So like, it really depends on the human. But that being
well,
said,
like
premise I
If
said again,
If it was Willie Picton versus
I
a
would
family
kill
dog,
him over
see,
even an
yeah,
annoying
if we
chihuahua.
apply that scenario
okay.
and then
But
like
I
that
do.
implication
Sorry,
to the
One second.
Titanic, okay, then like women and
we
children are
we
therefore
got
like
it. Sorry, one
what?
second. Doobie, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I need to get going. Unfortunately, got some family stuff that came up. But yeah, I might be around later. It was nice
Okay.
talking to you.
Yeah.
See you around,
Be
Doobie.
safe, buddy. Hopefully you get back
Have a
here
good one,
soon.
Doobie.
Peace.
Okay.